Everybody, it's Jim from Sprague Woodturning. This week we're going to return to some of this awesome box elder burl, combine it with some really cool designer epoxy to make our first cheese board with a custom tile and a knife. Hope you enjoy it. So for the 95,000 subscriber giveaway, what I thought we would do is cast some more of this fantastic box elder burl. Here, this is going to be a knife handle, and I'll explain that in a second. And of course, three beautiful, fantastic pieces of box elder burl. So what I want to do is make a cheese knife board set. So a friend of mine who's a potter years ago made these tiles for me, and this is something you can do to support your local artisans, you woodturners. If you're looking for tiles for cheese boards, just go to a potter that you know and like, and get them to make these tiles, and then you can inlay them into your work. So it's kind of a collaboration. And along with that, here's the knife. I got this years ago from Craft Supplies USA. I'm assuming they still sell them. So this is rather large for that, but what I'm going to do is cast this and then split it down the center and then half it again, and then you've got 4 knife blanks for the future. And we'll put 3 of these together, some sort of orientation such as this, and then we're going to use some Blue Laguna, fan favorite. And what I'm going to do is add a little bit of pearl white with it to lighten it up so that it matches this color perfectly. And then we're going to pour white as well with it. So we're going to try and get some white veining throughout this piece because we're going to use art cast. All right, well, that's it for that. Let's get these laid out, get them on the bandsaw, and we'll figure out how much resin we need after that. Something like that. Really trying to avoid any of these straight pieces. I think that we may be okay though. All right, let's go to the bandsaw and cut these out. Some of you may have noticed from the thumbnail that the tile itself is different. I end up missing the color match on this, and that tile, after I looked at it a second time, looked more purpley than blue, so I should have gone in that direction. Regardless, I think it's a beautiful tile that we got out of this, and I think that it matches the set very well. So after getting these cut, then we got to clean up the edge here. That's just a brass brush that's mounted on my lathe in a Jacob's chuck. It does a great job cleaning up all those little spiky areas. Now, the one thing that I don't want to see in this project is any straight lines. And so all I'm doing here is just kind of rounding this over, and that way there's not a straight hard line left over. Of course, that brush that's mounted on the lathe can't reach into all these little areas, so you'll see me use a pick tool, a couple of different brass brushes, and it's important to get rid of any of the bark that you see in here. And the main reason for that, because we're using art cast, and this resin is going to set up very quickly, so it's not going to really penetrate through the bark and hold it in place. So it is important to really, as far as I'm concerned, get rid of any bark before casting. Just working on a little bit of layout. That piece actually broke off. I can't remember how that broke off, but anyway, it broke off. And using the rice method again, you'll see later on that I pretty much get the perfect amount of resin. So if you're having some issues pouring out the right amount of resin, switch to this method. Just make sure you get rid of all of it so that it doesn't end up in your final piece like that one little speck that I had in the Laughing Faces holoform. It's not the end of the world, but I prefer certainly not to have it in any of my castings. That's for sure. All right, that is 1.5 liters. Give me a second. So this was pointed out to me last time I did this. We want to add 40%. So instead of doing the number and then times 40%, you've got 1.5 times 1.4. And that gives you 2.1. That's the level of resin that you're going to need. I'll have to figure out exactly what's going to be best for that, because I'm not sure measuring it out in the cups is going to work for us for that number, but I'll try and get it as close as possible as I can. Right, before I mix the resin up, we should get these glued in place so that we're ready. I was going to use some Stoner mold release, but with all these pieces breaking apart, I guess I'll just glue them in place. I know that people all the time say, Jim doesn't use mold release. Why don't you use mold release? And the reason for that is because if I sprayed mold release in here, then I'm not going to be able to basically glue these down and make sure that they're not going to move. I would sooner fight with these, getting them out of the bucket or the container, the casting bucket, than have it move around and ruin the project. So that's why I don't like to use the mold release unless I can it's a big piece of wood and I can just put a rock on it to hold it in place, and it's not going to move around and cause any heartache. Of course, another option is to spray the mold release and then clean off the areas that you want to glue down. But you know, for me, it's just not worth the risk. If you don't get that mold release cleaned off there before you glue these pieces down, then, you know, there is a chance that it's going to move. And if it moves, then something like this would totally, if one of those pieces moved inwards, would ruin this project. So that's why I like to do it the way that I'm doing here. The knife blank was a little bit shorter and not as wide as the container, so I thought that I would glue it in place as well as opposed to putting a weight on it. This week we're going to use the art cast. I need that color separation. I can get that with deep cast, but I was kind of short on time like I usually am, and that's why I went in this direction. This is a 1-to-1, so as far as measuring is concerned, it's really not that big of a deal. What I was saying earlier, I was trying to figure out how much white resin that I wanted inside of the casting to go with the Blue Laguna. So that's why I was having some issues with what am I going to do with 2.1 liters of resin. I absolutely love the color that we got on this piece, along with the white that's combined with it. But the color was off just enough with the original tile that I showed at the beginning of this video, where I'm like, you know, I don't really care for this. And anyway, it's trying to color match stuff like this, I find is a bit of a challenge, but in the end, the tile that I've selected is a great tile too. You know, I think it looked better darker. If anything, I think I'm going to throw another little spoonful of the Blue Laguna back in here. All right, now we just got to wait for these to get up to temperature 60, 65 degrees, and then we'll do the pour. I think I will put the casting in the pressure pot though, so that we don't have to fool around with that afterwards. I'll bring you back when that's ready. All right, we're at 63.5 degrees, so got to get moving here. Put that in after. I don't show it on camera, but I actually poured a little bit of the Blue Laguna into the knife handle blank. And then here I am just dumping the rest of it back in the casting. I'd waited maybe a little too long to pour this, so it's kind of like, okay, we got to get this done. And whatever I get on film, I get on film. I thought that I would pour the white onto the pieces of wood and then hopefully have it kind of flow down onto where the Blue Laguna was sitting. That was the goal. And then I'm just using a barbecue skewer to just kind of move it around. There's the knife handle blanket now, and just dropped a bunch of weight in it too. Overall, very happy with the casting, except for one little issue. All right, got to get the cover on this before it sets. We'll see you guys tomorrow. All right, well, it is the next day. So early indications were that things were great, and then I took this off the top, and there's a big thermal crack right down through the center of it. So, you know, it would be too easy to recast this, just fill this in, but there may be more thermal cracks underneath that we can't see. So, unfortunately, we're going to have to take this out of here, and I believe this blank is okay. I don't see any cracks at all in that. But again, maybe what I'll do is split it on the bandsaw, and then just to make sure that there's no issues in there, because we may have to recast that as well. Wouldn't be normal if we weren't having issues. Come on. I might have just cracked the resin here too when I was getting that out. It does in fact look like that is the only spot too. I don't see any other spots. Ordinarily, I would say fill this with some gold resin, but with this, I don't think it's going to look all that great. So what I'm going to do is mix up some more Pro Series, and I think that I will just tint it the blue color. I might add a little bit of white to it, and then fill this in, and we'll see what it looks like. If we don't like the look of it tomorrow, well, I guess we'll recast another one. I have to take this one apart, get it out. It's held together with screws. Doesn't look to be any cracks at all. So that's good. I'm not even going to cut that open. All right. So of course, the other thing that we got going for us is that this is really going to probably cover up the majority of that crack anyway. But just to be safe, I'll mix up some more resin and we'll do another pour. So I've mixed up 8 ounces of art cast. It is a lighter tint than what we see. So if any of these cracks are visible, hopefully they will disappear. And the other thing too is I took the casting out and covered the hole in the bottom of this, because all of this would have gone straight through there. So that's done. So yeah, I'm just going to pour this on here and then throw it back in the pressure pot. I never waited any length of time on this either. Just got done mixing it. it's still going down into the crack, so I don't know. Hopefully 8 ounces will be enough to take up. I pushed it down as hard as I could, and it's so heavy it shouldn't float, so that shouldn't be an issue. Now some of you may be wondering why I just didn't tape off the bottom of this and then tape off the area where I thought it had cracked. There were some other spots that I didn't show on the camera that were a little questionable, so I said, okay, I'm going to recast this whole thing, and that way hopefully it'll fill in any thermal cracks if there are any more. In the end, I actually didn't crack that piece. It was on top of the wood. Looks like I need to mix up some more. Wow. All right, here's another 8 ounces. As you can see, I've got a couple of rocks on here now for some weight. This might be a little bit stronger in color, but not very much. Looking back at it now, probably what I should have done was run this through my drum sander like we'll see later on. And then that way I would have been able to look at all of the resin and said, okay, this needs to be fixed here or not. But you know, I just didn't think about it at the time. In the end, this works for us, and that's the important thing. All right, there, finally stopped. So what I'm going to do is throw this in a pressure pot, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Hopefully, this will be it. Hopefully. All right, crack's been all filled in. Let's get this out. It's free all the way around. It wasn't glued. There you go. You cantankerous son of a... I see what happened. The resin, I didn't bother caulking it a second time, and the resin went all the way down and around the edge of this, so that's what was holding it. Okay. Anyway, that was easy, right? Man. We're going to run this through the drum sander, get 2 flat surfaces, and then we'll get a glue block on it. Here I'm just showing that I ground down all those edges that were sticking up. This way it tends to cut you less as well. I know that a lot of wood turners don't have access to a drum sander like this, but when you're working on flat work like this, this is my preferred method of doing this. Once I get this flat, I'll be able to throw a glue block on it and then basically go to the lathe and, you know, basically finish the piece without ever having to re-chuck it or move it to the other side of the lathe. So for me, having the drum sander has certainly been a big addition to my wood turning business. So if you're looking at getting one, I would highly recommend getting one, because of course you'll be able to use it for cutting boards and amongst a lot of other things. And the last thing I want to do is just take a belt cleaner and clean up the sandpaper that's on the drum. That way it's ready to go for the next project. Now that things are nice and flat, here I'm just finding center. That way I'll be able to put my glue block on exactly where I want to, and you'll see that here in a second. So I'm going to drill a small little hole, not very deep, hardly at all, like maybe a 1/16 of an inch. And then you'll see me have one of my awls shoved through the waste block, and then of course that'll be dipped in hot melt glue, and once that's set, you're ready to put it on the lathe. I find it very interesting to hear from people that, you know, they're not wood turners and they don't realize how violent it is when you first put a piece of wood on the lathe, because it's not going to be perfectly round. And in this case, I'm basically cutting the rim back until I can get wood exposed all the way around it. And I should mention that we're using the Hercules here. This is the number 3 from Hunter Tool Systems. And just like all of the sponsors that you'll see in the video here, all the links are in the description down below. So if you need some stuff, head down there and put some money back in your pocket. The way that I typically do all of my platters, and I'll call this a platter because that's essentially what it is, with a tile in the center of it. I always start on the outside edge, cut it back until I'm happy with that surface, and then I'll move to the back side of the platter. Basically do the profile, but probably not the finished profile. Just get it very close, and then I'll move to the face, and then basically trim it to where I'm happy with it, and then I'll go back, touch up the back side of the platter, and then you're usually ready for sanding. If I had have cast this in deep cast and the 3 days to let it all weep in and harden up a lot of this box out of burl, the problem with this stuff is it's got borderline dry rot, but the stuff is so nice. There's no way that I've got to do something with this stuff, and I'm glad that I can hopefully share it with the world here. But I'm already starting to see that it's a little punky in some areas, so I know that that's going to be an issue when it comes to sanding. So even at this stage, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to have to basically do a resin penetrating coat. So that's going to be coming up. But it's just, this stuff is absolutely fantastic. To be able to get a tree, well, it's probably about half a tree that's loaded with this much box elder burl is really, really awesome. And I really hope whoever wins this is appreciative of that, because it is a beautiful wood. It truly is. A normal thing that I usually do with a lot of these platters that I make is the foot area is really wide. That way, when people are using the knife to cut, the cheese up on the cheese tile, that, it's not rocking around. So keep that in mind if you want to make items like this. Pretty much all of my platters have really wide bases like this, and I think that that's probably the best way to do them, just to make them more stable. And yeah, I'm just seeing more and more of that punky wood, and I'm like, I guess I'm going to have to do yet another resin pour. When things go good, they go good. We had a really good one last week, and I knew that I was on borrowed time. And sure enough, here we are this week, and I'm seeing that, this thing's fighting me a lot along the way here. So before we can do any of that resin work, I figured it was best to get it down to its almost thickness that I want to use. And then that way, hopefully, when we do the resin penetrating coat, that it actually will go completely through the piece, and you won't have any more issues with sanding in the future. Because if you don't tackle this, when you rub your hand across this platter, you're going to feel nothing but lumps and bumps. Even after the resin penetrating coat, there's a little bit of it, but not much at all. It's actually quite nice. And there may be some wondering why I didn't stabilize these pieces, and that certainly would be an option. The only problem with that is cactus juice is not food safe. It's not safe for food contact. And that's why I did not stabilize these pieces, because I figured that these, this is going to be used for food. So that's another consideration. Another one is using the proper glaze. Now, I'm not a potter, but I was a member of the artist co-op here in Deep River, and I just figured that all glazes were safe for food, but they're not. So a potter would know this. Any potter that's worth their weight would know that what's the proper glazes to use if you're using it for a cheese tile. But there's some glazes out there that are not suitable for food contact. So make sure that is also a priority if you get tiles made. But they should know. There's our first real look at this, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is pretty cool. Just pointing out the crack and how it's not going to be an issue, that the tile is actually going to cover it. And it actually blends in pretty decent too. If you hadn't been able to mix a little bit of white in there, you may not have ever picked it up. So I'm just going to do some final trimming here. Layout. This is on the small size for the cheese tile. I haven't got the large. I haven't got its set dimensions yet. I don't see any point in doing that at this stage. But what I want to do is take that down and basically expose any of that wood so that it can get some epoxy penetration as well. Because I'm just doing a brush on type epoxy penetration coat, I don't know if putting it in the pressure pot would have been any benefit or not. I'm sure that this won't be the last time that we deal with this, so maybe in the future we'll try that. But I didn't really see the sense of it because it's not submerged in the epoxy. It's just being brushed on. So there you go. I think it looks really nice. Islands in the sea. Too bad that center part's going to be covered up. The last thing that I want to do here is take some 80 grit and sand the surface. By sanding the surface, you'll open up the pores of the wood and it will accept the epoxy better. Same with finishes and this kind of business. I'm going with the Pro Series for this. Pro Series is nice and thin, and it's a 2-to-1 resin. It is a little cloudy, but as long as it's under 1/8 of an inch in depth, it's not an issue. And just warm it up in a little bit of water just to keep it flowing nice. All right, so to fill in these punky areas, that's what the Pro Series is for here. I've warmed it up in the warm water so it should flow well, and hopefully it's going to harden up these punky areas, and I'll be able to get a clean cut on it tomorrow, and then of course get a coat finish on it. I don't care if this brush loses any bristles because it's all going to be turned away anyway. There's a lot of bristles coming out of this. Definitely not good for a resin brush. To be quite honest with you, I was quite surprised at how much epoxy this wood soaked up. I mixed up 6 ounces thinking it would be lots, but wow, did it ever drink it up. There, that's all dry. See it? More dry spots here. Anyway, I'll just keep doing this until the resin starts to set up, then I'll be forced to stop, but it's looking pretty good. But as dry spots develop, I'll keep hitting it with the resin, and we'll see you tomorrow to give this a final trimming and set the cheese tile in place. The good thing is about this thermal crack is it's not going to affect the look of this at all because it stops. Ironically, it starts on a crack here and here. So I don't know if that had anything to do with the fact that it cracked in that spot. I find it interesting though. Since we're stalled on the platter portion of this, I figured that we would work on the knife handle. So just cutting it to dimension right now. There was no thermal cracking on the inside of this. I was a little surprised that the platter cracked as well. I think that the main reason it probably did that is because I waited so long. So the resin was quite hot before I could get it under pressure. It was around an inch, so I was quite surprised when I did see it cracking, but probably waited too long before actually adding the pressure to the pressure pot. Here I've got the blank mounted in my spigot jaws on my stronghold from One Way Manufacturing. Now, if you're going to attempt something like this, these blanks that have resin and wood in them, keep in mind that you're going to have to drive a knife into the end of this. So if you orientate it so that on the outer end it's resin and not wood, you're going to have a hard time doing that. On the other end that went into the jaws, it's both, but there was enough wood there where I wasn't too concerned about it breaking off. But that's something that you really need to consider when you're doing this. I've never tried this. Maybe some have, but if you maybe heated up the tang end of the knife before pushing it into the resin, maybe that would work, and certainly maybe that would even make a greater bond to the resin / wood handle. But I find it best to just drive it into the wood, and then that way you're not going to have any issues and try and figure out what's going on. So here I'm fitting the ferrule to go on the end of this. This pretty much comes with every knife blank that I've got. I ended up swapping the one out that I originally showed on camera. I didn't really care for the serrated edge on it. So this one's a little bit more cheese knife looking, where the other one looked more like a steak knife almost. So I did that. Again, you don't want this ferrule to be loose. You want it to be nice and tight. Still got finish to go on top of this, so that will certainly tighten it up if it's a little loose. But you definitely want to make it as tight as you can. So for the knife handle, we're dealing with the same sort of stuff. It's just really kind of soft. So for the handle, I'm going to use the Starbond thin. That way we'll be able to move on with this right away and get it done, at least to its first coat of finish anyway. For those who are curious, yes, this would have been an option for the platter as well. The only issue is it would have been a much more expensive option. So this is one of the reasons why I went with the epoxy and not the CA glue for the platter. She's definitely thirsty. I'll let that sit for about 10 or 15 minutes and then we'll go back at it. Might have to leave it a little bit longer. There's a lot of CA glue as it cures down inside of this. See you in a bit. Now, since I was having a real hard time getting a nice clean cut on this, you're going to see me use a variety of tools until eventually I go back to the Scotchy gouge like I'm using here now. This seems to work really well. I'm not good with a skew. If you were good with a skew, this would have been the project for you. I am not. And this is kind of a half skew, half gouge affair. And for me, it actually works quite well. I know that I've mentioned this a lot in the past. I hate center work, even though some people say that I'm good at it. I definitely don't think that I am, because anybody that's good at center work would have had this done in no time. totally forgot to drill it out. So now that it's really thin on the backside, I'm like, oh, I guess I should try and drill this out. So make sure you drill that out prior to basically making it thin on the back end here. I can't believe I forgot that actually. I was like, oh yeah. I mean, you could take it over to the drill press and do that, but it's certainly better to do it on the lathe. You'll have it nice and centered perfectly. Any other way, it could be iffy. So I'm just leaving enough material here so that I can do some sanding, and then I'll be able to just take the Scotchy gouge and basically part the piece off and just do a little bit of hand sanding afterwards. All right, I happen to have some Waterlux gloss already from doing a coat of finish on something else, so I'm going to use that up on the handle. I didn't buff this. That shouldn't be an issue. That hand sanding on the end is really all this needs as well. So this is just one of those barbecue skewers. It's about the right size. I had a little bit of paper towel on the end of it. Seems to work just fine. Well, that's a pretty good indication as to what the platter portion is going to look like. Very nice. All right, we'll see you tomorrow for trimming up the platter piece, and hopefully we'll get that to its first coat of finish. We definitely have to, because it's going to be late if I don't. See you tomorrow. All right, it is the next day. Things are nice and hardened up. I can't put my fingernail into anything anymore, so that's good. Just got a lot of drips. I mean, I kept putting this on and putting it on and putting it on. I was just soaking this up, but it's, you know, it's good and hard now, and I can't even drive my fingernail into it. All right, let's get it trimmed up and get our first coat of finish on. So once we get this excess epoxy trimmed away, we should be just about ready for sanding. I do thin it out just a slight bit. In the past, you've heard me say resin, you've heard me say epoxy. My understanding is that resin is part A, because this is a two-part epoxy. And when you add the hardener, which is part B, it turns it into epoxy. So I know it's commonly referred to as resin and it's commonly referred to as epoxy. Essentially, they're the same terms to me. If somebody says to me, oh, are you doing a resin finish or an epoxy finish? Well, they're both the same. So I know that I've been asked that myself. So that's my understanding of it anyway. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, you know, things are starting to look really good. That penetrating coat really hardened up the surface of the platter, so I'm very happy with that. There you can see how cleanly the surface is cut. That burl's just amazing, amazing stuff. And the red, I'll cover that as well. The red is essentially a fungus that grows inside of box elder, and you'll typically see it in stressed areas. So if a tree gets a branch ripped off of it, you'll find the majority of the red is going to be around that wound, if you will. So I know there's been a number of people ask me that over the years as well. But it's a fungus that's in the tree, or occurs naturally in the tree. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not going to harm you in any way. Sure gives you some really cool, awesome red colors. I have heard that over time that possibly it fades to brown, but I haven't experienced that. But if you have, I'd like to hear from you and tell me that, yeah, a bunch of stuff in a box elder that had some red in it, and then it turned it brown. So there's a good look at the top surface. Happy with that. Couple of more spots that really need to be addressed yet, but again, that epoxy coat really helped. There was a crack right there that got filled in, so we'll have to trim that back a little further. But soon it'll be time to work on where the tile is, and we'll be able to sand this and get our first coat of finish on it. So now that we're going to set the tile, I'm going to use a parting tool, and every one of these tiles, I mean, this is the great thing about handmade products. They're all different. So they were all roughly the same size, but some were, there might have been, say, a 1/16 of an inch to an 1/8 of an inch in diameter in difference. So that's one thing that you have to do. Make sure you measure each one of your tiles, because they're going to be all different, especially if they're made from pottery. I know that you can commercially buy tiles that are made out of marble, and they look nice, and I've used them in the past. But it's like I said earlier, I really like to try and, as soon as I found out that a potter could make these for me, I'm like, well, that's awesome. I'll be able to spread the wealth around within the artisan community. So I'm glad that I did that. I should mention that these tiles were made by a woman named Legita. I believe that she's retired now. So if she's watching these videos, thanks for this, Legita. I do appreciate it. I just want to take this down. Sizing stuff like this, it's a little too tight. So I'm leaving just a little tiny space around it, so that if the wood moves in the future, hopefully it's not going to pop that tile out of there. I think that, over 50% of the tile area is resin and it's not wood, so that, that won't move over the years, but it's best to leave just a tiny little bit of slack there, just so that if it does move, it's not going to basically pop the tile out. If you mess up the diameter on this, it's not a big deal, because I've still got probably 3/4 of an inch or more, even more than that, where I can cut another groove and recess the tile down. So that's not really that big of a concern. For those who are curious, I don't embed the tile flat with the wood around it. I put it in about halfway. That's about where I like to set it, and that will be at its thickest dimension. Finally, on to sanding. It has taken a little bit to get here with the bumps in the road. So everything was sanded from 60 to 800, and where the tile is sitting, I just hit it with the 60 grit just to give a good tooth for the material that we're going to use to bond the tile to the wood. That's important. On the back side of the platter, I was having a hard time getting in because of the headstock with the drill. So I just switched to my right angled sander, air powered sander, and that fixed that problem. Once everything was sanded to 800, I then used the triple E buffing compound to buff the resin. As you noticed, I didn't do anything where the tile is going to be sitting because we don't want any of that in there. And then after that's done, we'll use some denatured alcohol to clean the surface, and we'll finally be able to get on to our first coat of finish. All right, this is the first coat of Waterlux Gloss. Not that it's absolutely crucial. I decided to make sure to put some of the Waterlux on all the wood parts that are inside where the tile is going to be sitting. Once the adhesive goes in there, it's probably not going to get any air to it anyway, but I erred on the side of caution and put some finish on that wood as well. Well, there it is. Man, that resin is exactly what I was looking for. Backside's pretty cool too. Sure is drinking up a lot of finish though. That burl is amazing stuff. Love that box elder burl. So big it's hard to get it on camera here. The white in there is actually perfect. It's exactly what I was going for. Right, we'll see you tomorrow for the second coat. She's a beauty. This may be getting repetitive for some people, but for the new people, I always buff between applications of the Waterlux with the triple E buffing compound, then clean it with the denatured alcohol, and then we are ready to put the second coat of finish on. Love that Waterlux. Well, that didn't work out so well since my battery died. Having issues with my batteries. I guess I need to change them. They're just not lasting as long. But second coat definitely looks better. Anyway, after the battery shut off, I had to get out my power cord for the camera. And I noticed that there was a little ring around here, so I just wiped that. This is going to take 3 coats for sure. So one of the reasons why I'm out here so early this morning is so that I can hopefully second coat this later on today. So what do you think? I think it's awesome. This box elder burl, wow. And the resin, I'm happy with that too. All right, let's do the knife handle. There, I think that'll do that for that. I don't think it'll need a third coat. All right, there will be a third coat on the platter, I will do that the same as I did this coat, and we'll see you when we're doing the bottom. Since this waste block is at the end of its useful life, I figured that I would just take the faceplate off it and then mount the piece on my vacuum chuck and then remove the waste block. That way you wouldn't be able to get a parting tool in there to part this piece off. So in the back of my mind, when I put this on here, I knew that I wanted a shorter waste block, because if you had a larger one, you might have been able to get the parting tool in there, but it would have been a little sketchy because of the width of this. So it's if you're going to use this method, make sure that you use a waste block that you're not too concerned about actually whittling away at the end. Now that the waste block has been removed by the gouge, I switch back to the Hercules, and if you remember, I've got this really wide foot, so just going from the center and working my way out all the way to the edge. It is slightly concave on the very bottom, that way it won't rock when it's sitting on the table or in use. And as far as sanding is concerned, I only sand it to 500 on the bottom of this piece because I knew that I had to do some writing. Really wasn't that big of an issue because I didn't sign on the resin, I did sign on the wood. But regardless, 500 I think is more than good enough for a piece like this. After all, it is the base. We're getting ready to put the tile in. This is what I'm going with. You know what? It's just a clear waterproof silicone, 100% silicone. And I realize that this may not be food grade. There are food grade silicones, and they had one at the store, but it was red in color. And if any of it squeezed out, that's not going to look good. So I think that it's best to stick to clear. And then, you know, if this joint does fail in the future, usually everybody's got some clear silicone kicking around. Just put it back on there and stick the plate on. It should be good. What I'm going to do is run a fine bead all around the outside of this. That way when the tile gets embedded in it, it's not going to be able to get water underneath of it. And probably just do this number. You don't want to put too much in here because having a little bit of squeeze out is fine. Just make sure that you clean it all up, and then that's it. The cheese is going to be sitting on the tile. I'm not too concerned about food contact with this because it's going to be on the sides of the tile or underneath it. The other benefit of using silicone as an adhesive is, of course, it's flexible. So if the wood moves a little bit underneath of the tile with the seasons, hopefully it won't pop that tile free, unlike if you're using an adhesive like, say, PL Premium. There you go. All right, let's install the knife handle onto the knife. So here's our knife. As you can see, it's not meant for steak. The teeth are a little finer on it. This is just router padding that I've doubled up a number of times. Put that in the vise. This is important, and don't forget it. Don't ask me how I know that, because I've been down this road. So the other thing that you need to think about is orientation of the knife handle in relationship to the blade. Do you put it on the side like this, or like this? I'm thinking, it's mostly probably going to be on its side, so actually, let's just do like a 45-degree angle type business. Something like that. Here's more router material, router padding material, I should say. So put that on there like this. So, yeah, I guess maybe my hand's going to be in the way, isn't it? And there you have it. All right, so we haven't picked a winner for this beautiful little set. So let's do that. Since the last giveaway video at 90,000 subscribers, there's been 12 videos, including the 90,000 giveaway. These are the names that the random YouTube comment picker has selected for each one of the 12 videos. What we're going to do is throw these names into a lidded dish, shake it up, pick a winner. Good luck. All right, well, here are the 12 names. So in they go. And mix them up here. Give that a good shake. Lid off. And the winner of the 95,000 subscriber giveaway is right here in my hand. Philip Boswell. You are the winner of the 95,000 subscriber giveaway. Congratulations. Send me an email to spraguewoodturning@gmail.com and I will get your details and get your get your cheese platter nailed out to you. Congratulations. And if you're curious, he actually commented on roughing out logs, one of the roughing out videos. So congratulations. All right, let's talk about this week's project. So this is certainly something that we have not done before. The dimensions on this, I've got it written down here, 13 3/4 across. That's 35 centimeters and an inch tall in overall thickness. And so that's 25 millimeters. I'm really happy with the resin on this. It's too bad that this tile actually covered up a lot of really nice resin, really. You can feel some undulations in it, but you know, with taking that epoxy and hardening up that soft wood, it certainly really worked quite well. Here is the back side. No time for finish yet. It actually might even be nicer than the front side, but absolutely beautiful wood, and hopefully he enjoys this. So I'm gonna set this down. The knife is 6 inches long, and that's 15.25 centimeters in length. And it's a good size. I mean, these aren't meant to cut up vegetables, you know, like these are just cheese knives. And this is a better selection than the other one, that's for sure. All right, set this down as well. All right, well, don't forget to put designer epoxy in the comments down below to be entered into the giveaway kit at 100,000 subscribers. What are we at? We're probably around 95,600 and something right now. So it's actually picking up a little bit, but it certainly has been slow, that's for sure. But anyway, when we get to 100,000, designer epoxy is going to give away a 3-gallon kit. So if you want to be entered into that, put designer epoxy by itself in the comments down below. And of course, that's only for Canada and the lower 48 US states. Next week is actually going to be a natural edge bowl. So I'm going to do 2 natural edge bowls, something that I rarely do on this channel. It's really not my thing, but I know that it's big in the wood turning world, and there's not going to be any inlay in it, anything like that. So you pure wood lovers, this one's for you next week. So please come on back for that. All right, well, that's it. Take care, stay safe. Don't forget the bell. Congratulations again, Philip. We're winning the cheese tray and the knife. Hopefully you enjoy it. See you next week.